when you look to the Gospels then, and you look to Jesus, what do you see Jesus doing to contend with the mess of humanity? It's a huge question, right? But like, what evidence in the Gospels do you see of Jesus confronting the mess of humanity, and how does he actually respond to it?
Well, firstly, he affirms the major premise of the book, which is the mess isn't going anywhere. And he affirms it most specifically in his line, "The poor will always be with you." It's like, it's arresting, right? It's like, no, hold on, that can't be true. We must be able to do something about that. And of course, what does he mean? We don't actually know. But we do know that he speaks about poverty not exclusively as a material experience. We all have forms of poverty. You go to the wealthiest neighborhoods on the planet, and these people have deep levels of poverty in some aspect of their life. But he does affirm that the mess isn't going anywhere. It is here to stay in the book. But I think the other thing that is perhaps most poignant to the conversation is that God could have saved humanity any which way. Could have clicked his fingers and that would have been salvation. How did God choose to bring salvation to the world? He chose to come as a child, helpless, and to place himself right in the middle of our mess. I think very often when someone else has created a mess, which we tend to do, we do create messes for ourselves. Sometimes messes just happen. Natural disasters, those sorts of things. Messes just happen. And they can bring devastating heartache and sadness and suffering to our lives. But we do create some of the messes in our lives. And I think sometimes as human beings, when we encounter someone who's made a mess of their life, I think we do have a tendency sometimes to say, all right, well, that's your mess. You made it, you clean it up. And that is not the mind of God. God places himself, the Christmas moment is God placing himself in the middle of our mess. Doesn't try to avoid it, doesn't come in such form that he could be closed off from certain aspects of the mess. Place himself right in the middle of our mess. And I think that's beautiful when you really stop and think about your own mess, to understand that God wants to place himself right in the middle of your mess. To understand that God wants to place himself right in the middle of your mess. Okay? He's not waiting for you on the other side of your mess saying, when you've taken care of that mess, let's resume our relationship. And I think that is incredibly hopeful. I heard God laugh. One of my favorite lines in the book is, you can't live without hope that things will change for the better. And what happens when we get in the mess is we lose hope. Not that things will change for the better, but even that things can change for the better. And that becomes a devastating downward spiral, I think. Wow. You made it to the end. I knew somebody would. Thanks for watching. If you look around your life and you look around the world, I think you will discover there's a lot of people who need messages like this filled with hope and inspiration. So please share the message far and wide with everyone in your circle of influence.